So, we don't know each other, but I was fascinated learning about you in order to talk to you today. So tell me what you studied at Berkeley.
Communications, sort of advertising and marketing, which I didn't think would come in handy. And it didn't uh, until I got to the place in my career where I could sort of make career choices. You know, for the first bit of your career, you'll do whatever, right? And then after a
Yep.
while, I started to understand my place and my sort of function in our industry, and I started to realize the work that I had done about like what media does to society, right? Like at Cal, the communications degree is more theoretical than practical, which actually is serving me really well right now, right? Sort of understanding what we put out into the world as creators and the effect that has, you know. One of my favorite stories was when we were in a advertising class. We had to go through a magazine and just count the number of white people, Black people, and other. And then at the end of the class, we just gave our numbers and what impressions we had. And one of the groups was like, we had a weird moment because there was a Post-it ad and it was just a thumb. So all you could see was the thumb. Now it was clearly a white thumb, but we didn't really know how to count that. And this Black guy from the back of the room goes, "No, that's the thumb of the oppressor. You better count that." But what's funny is like, that's stuck in my head that like the littlest things are salient to people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think about that constantly these days, constantly.
That reminded me of a story that happened to me. This is the red pilling of America, because I made this film called Red Pill, and I feel like the world has been red pill. We've all been sold this bill of goods about how life in the world works. And at one point, we had an editor looking at the film, and this character played by Ruben Blades, says, they killed all my people, but kept their name. And someone else says, for the roads, like the road signs. And he says, if I were born in this country, I'd run for president. And someone else says, you're not from the right side of the wall. And this Caucasian editor said, I mean, is that really appropriate? What country is he from? And what wall are you talking about? And I was like, all of them. Y'all did it in every country. There's really no country where that didn't happen. Yep. So for brown people, we understand. It's just clear.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. You don't need to, there's no explanatory comma needed there.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is your place in this business? Because I read that you are Iranian American. What generation? How many generations?
So my parents came here in the early 70s from Iran. So I was the first generation to be born here. Yeah.
And I know you play a lot of South Asians.
Yep, I've played some South Asians over the years. I've played Arabs. I've played Middle Eastern people, and then I've played a bunch of characters whose were sort of not ethnicity.
Now, is Iran Middle East or South Asian?
Iran is considered a part of the Middle East.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard, Uzbekistan and all those places are South Asian, right?
I don't know how far North South Asian is considered. Certainly India and Pakistan, but I don't know past that. But yeah, okay. I've played a bunch of different characters, some having to do with my ethnicity and some not. And we participated in a study a year or so ago, this group that I'm a member of called the MENA Arts Advocacy Council, MENA standing for Middle Eastern and North African. And we participated in a study with an academic named Nancy Wong Yoon, who wrote Real Inequality, REEL. And she basically counted all of the Middle Eastern people in series regular roles on TV. And what we found was that if the role was Middle Eastern, right? Forget about the actor, right? First of all, let's just talk about the Middle Eastern actors. Okay, now that we're talking about Middle Eastern actors, if the role was Middle Eastern, it was deeply engaged in terrorism, either doing it or fighting it. If the role was not Middle Eastern, then all bets were off, right? So you could have a Middle Eastern woman, playing a lawyer, right, on a legal drama, right? But her character was not Middle Eastern in that, right? So that's what I talk about when I talk about like my place, right? Sort of understanding like what function am I serving to primarily white storytellers, right? What are they doing
Mm-hmm.
with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I'm useful to play what I call a brown white character, right? So like
Mm.
just yesterday, I booked my first job since lockdown happened, playing the role of Avery. And Avery is a guy with a dog who drops his dog off at daycare, and it's a cute little part, right? Now, first of all, put aside the fact that like people like me born in 1977 aren't named Avery. That just doesn't happen, right? Um, uh, the production benefits from my brown skin, right? Because what they do is they get to create a more multicultural looking cast, right? But I'm still playing the role of Avery. So in some respect, that character is white, right? And the character
Mm-hmm.
was written by a white guy, and I don't blame him for going like, yeah, it's just a guy with a dog. I'll name him Avery. It's a name that popped into his head. I don't think he was planning to hire a Persian guy, right? But he just wrote the part of Avery, right? So for me, part of what I do when I book a role like Avery is I send an email that my team then forwards to casting, which then forwards to the writing people to ask to change that character name to
Ooh,
something Middle Eastern, right? So now
I
there is a
love it, Amir.
thank you. So now there's a Middle Eastern character who has a dog who's dropping his dog off at daycare, right? Real straightforward. Because
I love it.
I think you might know this, but most white people in this country don't know any brown people, right?
Mhm.
75% of white people don't have any brown friends. That's a high fucking number, right? Which means that their entire concept of brown people is what they see on TV. And I don't think it's any wonder why most white people in this country think Muslims equal terrorists, right?
And brown people are criminal welfare queens.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Color of Change did a whole thing with black people in Hollywood, and they said there are way more judges in television than there are in real life, and they're
Wow.
judging black people terribly and administering this horrible justice. They're putting the words of white people's point of view about black people, putting it in black people's mouths. So
Yeah.
I actually wrote an essay on a medium called all of American entertainment culture get out. They just put their brown skin on their bodies.
There's a guy I know named Stephen Thrasher who you definitely should follow on Twitter.
Okay.
He has tweeted a lot about his obsession with black cops in pop culture. And what he talks about is he believes, and I hope I'm paraphrasing him correctly, is that black cops in pop culture help white America feel better about policing in America because they see it as, oh, right, see, there's these good Black people and they're holding bad Black people accountable. So when you see Black people being abused by the system, you know, that's not a white Black thing. It's also a Black thing. It's not racial, right? And it's I don't think it's any accident that suddenly we're seeing a lot more Black cops in pop culture. It speaks to this sort of discomfort that I think white people feel with policing, that they can't quite wrap their minds around, right? And so I think, I'm not saying that Hollywood is purposely casting Black people as cops to make white Americans feel better about cops, but I think that it's just interesting, right? And that's what I talk about when I talk about our function. Like, what are we doing on purpose, by accident? What are writers doing on purpose, by accident? But what is that accomplishing? How is that art affecting society and making people think about things, you know?
Well, you know, I say that I have graduated as an actor to the point of being one of the props that eats.
What did you say? Props that speaks?
Last season, one of the props that eats.
Oh, eats.
One of the props that eats. And I was elevated to the role of Madam Secretary on the show, Madam Secretary.
Oh,
I was not a recur. I was not a regular. I was a day player, and I had very few lines. But they could say, the Black woman is the title character on Madam Secretary. I had nothing to do. I was definitely a prop that eats.
yeah.
But as a set piece, it's a great narrative for them to tell.
Absolutely, right? And yeah, so they're benefiting from the color of your skin. Chenjerai Kumanyika, who co-created Uncivil.
You have to put that in the chat. Chenjerai Kumanyika. What? Put that in the chat.
All right, well, just look up the podcast Uncivil, which if you have, okay, so the fact that you're writing it lets me know you don't know what I'm talking about. You need to listen to the podcast, because my friend said, oh, you should listen to Uncivil. It's a history podcast. And I was like, no, thanks. And then I said, no, it's a history podcast about the Civil War. And I was like, definitely no, thanks. It's like, no, it's a history podcast about the Civil War from the perspective of Black people. And I was like, I'm in. So it's brilliant. So Chenjerai talks about Blackness as technology, which when he said that phrase, it blew my mind. And I was like, you need to write something about this. And he's like, man, I'm always working, but he's incredibly brilliant. And I have mad respect for him. But I think that's what we're talking about, right? So your Blackness was used as a technology by the producers of Madam Secretary to an end, to some end, right? Now, you know, there's many ends there, right? And we could get into that all day, but it's interesting that they're basically commodifying the color of your skin, the color of my skin, you know, whenever I get cast.
No. I mean, I'm loving this conversation. Loving it. You got this white woman over there in the corner that you're married to. What is the conversation between the two of you?
She's one of the good ones. No, it's
I know about the poster. Will I see you nice white ladies at the next Black Lives Matters march?
That was before the Women's March in 2000, right after Trump was elected, right? A couple of Black women who I respect and follow on Twitter, Joma Oluo, who wrote So You Want to Talk About Race, which is brilliant. And I think the other one who talked about it, if I'm not mistaken, was Jamila Lemieux.
No.
Okay, so they were both talking about how they had a whole bunch of feelings about the Women's March leading up to it, because all these white women were ready for that women's march, right? They were like, we're going to hit the streets, and they were like, write your emergency contact info on your arm because you never know what's going to happen. There was this real sense, right? There was this we're going to take it to the streets, forgetting that the majority of white women voted for Trump, right? Forgetting that cops don't generally beat up white women, right? And so, and I had been paying a lot of attention to Black Lives Matter in the years leading up to Trump's election, and had been to a few marches. I had seen white people at those, not a huge number, but so I related to what Jamila and Ijoma were saying about how, God, it feels like these white women should have hit the streets a little sooner, right? So I made that sign, right? I'll see you nice white ladies at the next Black Lives Matter march, right? And it was funny because a lot of Black women on that day were like, thank you. And what was interesting was I had a white woman go, yeah, invite me. And I was like, well, hold on, you've been invited. I don't know if you heard it. I don't know if you caught that. I don't know if you were paying attention, but the invites are there. It's on the Facebook, right? So it was cool that it went viral and people responded to it. But yeah, being married to a white woman is fucking American, right? You know what I mean? Like, and
I've married a couple of white guys, so yeah, it's American.
we have lots of conversations about it, and it's interesting. She has taught me so much about misogyny, right? Like, I was not a feminist before I met her. I think if I had to, if someone had asked me if I was a feminist, I probably would have said, sure, but do we really need it? I mean, aren't we equal at this point? And so I learned a lot about her from her, I should say. And yeah, we have a lot of conversations about race as well. I think that she works very hard.
She probably doesn't consider you brown.
She doesn't consider me brown.
Consider you brown.
She goes, I don't even see you as Persian. You're just a nice guy. No, she doesn't say that.
Colors.
No, yeah. I didn't even realize you were brown when I started dating you. No. She never said anything like that. No, and it's funny, it's so interesting when I talk about days when I'm having feelings about my place and about what's hard for me. And it's so interesting to seek solace with a white person, right? With the person who I love most in the world, but who is inherently a part of white supremacy, right? And but it's great. Like, she's the kind of person who's like, yeah, we're all racist. All white people are racist, and it's our job to fight against that. And I think, fuck it. I mean, I'm anti-Black also, right? Because I grew up in America, right? So it's my job to fight against my anti-Blackness every fucking day, right? Any thought that might pop into my head, I have to take a step back and go, haha, I know where that came from. That came from my parents, or that came from some TV show I saw when I was a kid, right? And I think my wife does that too. We trip up like always, but I think we support each other in that. We hold each other accountable in that. It's great. I'm lucky. I'm really lucky to have. In
a way that a lot of brown people wouldn't be. I saw you taking down somebody who went for Gabrielle Carteris. Like, you line by line dissected them, took them down. Where do you get the moxie for that? Where does that come from?
I guess
you weren't raised to be a shy brown person.
I wasn't, no. And you know what's interesting is a lot of Persian people are. I think that a lot of Iranian immigrants are like this, and they pass it on to their kids. And I think this comes from Iran, where keep your head down, don't say anything too political, just do your job, just take care of your family, and it'll be all right, right? I think a lot of Iranians brought that over from Iran, and I think a lot of them passed it on to their kids. I also think there's a value to a lot of Iranians in their proximity to whiteness, which is why they, just want to hang back and not step out of line. But for me, I just always, I don't know, I've always been mouthy, and I've always been really, I'm a little bit of a scorekeeper. Okay, thanks, Boo. I'm a little bit of a scorekeeper, and so I have a real like sense of like, that's right, that's wrong, that's a lie, that's the truth, right? And when I see someone tell some lies, there's some people out there right now who are telling lies about what's going on at the highest levels of SAG-AFTRA. And I don't like that. And so I try to call it out when I can. It's tough because a lot like conspiracy theories that come from the right, sometimes when people are angry enough, they just latch on to these conspiracy theories, and the truth doesn't really get into them. So yeah, I'll post stuff. I try to do that in moderation, because that old cartoon where there's a guy saying, hold on, honey, I'll be right there. There's someone said something wrong on the internet. It's like that, that's a rabbit hole that will never fucking end.
Have you ever had pushback from a show where you asked them to change the name
So I've never
to
had
a name that matched your culture?
I've never had pushback necessarily. There have been times where they said no. So I guess that is pushback. But I've never had any negative experiences with it, where people go, we disagree with your point there, right? I've had people go, well, that sort of changes it. I had one person say, that changes it to a story that I don't really want to tell. And I was like, oh, okay. I did have one time where I did a sitcom, and instead of having my agent go to casting, go to the writers, I went to the writers because I forgot to do it until I got to the set. And they said later that they didn't like that I did that. They didn't like that I went up to the writers and asked. But I would say probably 2/3, 3/4 of the time they're happy to do it. The one that I just got cast on, Avery, the showrunner was emailed back, I love that idea. Thank you. Yes. How's this name? Right. So I think that it's such a small thing, but I think it's really powerful. But I think it's small enough that most writers, most showrunners are happy to do it if it sort of works, There's been times where I asked for it too late.
Well, that's nice.
Someone already said my name or something like that. But yeah, I think for the most part, people are really receptive to it. Oh, say that again, Tanya. I think I lost you.
No. You've already been established in someone's mind that, in mouth, that they've said you, then they can't undo it.
Yeah.
So tell me the story of Stuff and Healing Justice.
So Story of Stuff is a nonprofit that grew out of a simple YouTube video that came out about 10 years ago, made by a woman named Annie Leonard. And it's a really powerful video that has gotten millions and millions of views all around the world, and has inspired environmentalists around the world to create their own sort of initiatives. But it basically talks about how when you have stuff, um, that stuff that you have in your hand has a life before it gets to you, and it has a life after it leaves you.
Mm.
And it affect when you throw something away, away is a place. And it's usually a place near poor brown people, right?
Woo.
And when that product is getting on its way to you, right, at the beginning of its life cycle, it's affecting people, right? And so it's really a video to encourage people to just consider that in the decisions that they make, whether that's what they buy, where they live, where they go, who they vote for, right? And so I was just a huge fan of the video and of Annie's, and through a series of sort of random-ish events, I became a board member on the Story of Stuff. And since then, we put out a bunch of more videos, Story of Electronics, Story of Bottled Water. We're engaging in various water fights, like Nestle is trying to steal groundwater all over the world, and we're trying to fight them on that. And then we've just made our first, say again?
I said Nestle is the devil.
Oh,
They went into Africa and told women their breast milk was not good and had them using heated water mixed with Nestle products to feed children who were then malnourished and dying. And then they bought all the water rights in Michigan.
yeah. Yeah, so I live in LA, and outside of LA is the San Bernardino National Forest, and they bought water rights from under San Bernardino at a cost of a few $100s a year, and they've had that for decades. And they pull millions of gallons of water that they then bottle and sell to people. So they're stealing our water,
yeah,
and selling it to people at a huge profit. And it's gross. I actually put my ear to the pipe that Nestle is using, and it was unsettling. It was chilling, right? So we just put out our first feature-length documentary, which is called "The Story of Plastics," and it's all about how there's this movement towards using less fossil fuel, right? Which is great. But all of the fossil fuel producers need a place to put that oil that they're pulling out of the water, since they can't put it in our gas tanks as much as they used to. What they're doing now is they're turning that gas into plastic and pushing it on people, right? So all of that is connected, right? And I think that's what I love about the Story of Stuff is it takes a holistic view of stuff. So I'm a board member. I'm so sort of thrilled and honored to be a board member on that. Annie has since left the Story of Stuff is now the executive director of Greenpeace USA, although she's still on the board at Story of Stuff. And then Healing Justice is actually an organization that I haven't had really any interaction with hardly at all. I'm on the board. I was asked to be on the board a while back, and then nothing has happened since then. I think it's a very small nonprofit that basically helps connect people who've been wrongly accused of crimes and people whose loved ones were victims of crimes and who had someone wrongly accused of that crime, right? So it's like my wife gets killed, so I'm a victim of someone's crime, and then someone gets wrongly accused of killing her, right? Ooh. So it connects me with that person who's wrongly accused, and there's healing there. It's incredibly complex. It's incredibly difficult, but it's a small nonprofit, and they do great work, and I am happy to be associated with them, but I don't do a whole lot of interacting with them at all.
Why do you care about this stuff?
I can't help it. It's fucking annoying.
Why do you, why do you care? Were your parents activists? Were your parents involved in this? Like, why do you care?
You know, my parents are not activists. They're, they're Iranians from Iran, and I think very much ascribe to what I talked about before, of that, just like, put your head down, don't make too much noise, you know, um, do good by doing well. You know what I mean? Kind of thing of like, look, yeah, of course the Amazon is terrible. Just get really rich and donate some money to the Amazonians. You know what I mean?
But why? But why? How did you become this way?
I'm not really sure. I think, it may have to do with feeling isolated as a kid, being the only Persian kid in my school, skipping a grade and being a year younger than anyone. I don't know if I don't know if I'd use the term bullied, but I certainly felt marginalized, right? Um, and and I think, as someone who has been marginalized, I have radar for that, right? Um, as someone who struggled with my identity, I have radar for identity politics, right? I grew up in a Persian household in a multicultural city, um, run by white people, right? I'm a little small. I'm not terribly butch, and every now and then people thought I might be gay, uh, and so I've always been fascinated by identity, right? And so when I see people being marginalized, that pings for me. When I see people being marginalized because of their identity, that's a double ping for me, right? And so I can't help it. I don't know. I pay attention to it, and I think unlike a lot of people, I see the problems in our world as actually very simple to solve. I think they're very straightforward, and I think that's what gets my goat so much, right?
Okay, so here's what some people see as a problem. I have a different take on it, but I want to know your take on it. We got 75 million people who, are kind of QAnon conspiracy theorists, and we got 80 million people who are, say they believe in democracy, and we got 100 million in the middle who just their life is too much, they can't get involved. How do we solve that? Or is there's a problem? I mean, do you think that's a problem? Do you think that's not a problem? Does that have to be solved?
Yeah, that's a problem. It's definitely a problem. So I think we can agree on that. I think that one of the biggest problems, and I agree with, oh crap, I'm blanking on his name, but he created the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama.
Brian Stevenson.
Brian Stevenson. Yes, yes. I was thinking Steven. No, Brian Stevenson. That we don't in this country understand our history.
Well, we
And
haven't been taught our history, so we can't understand what we haven't been taught.
exactly. And I think, and more to the point, I don't think we understand racism. I think that Gene Denby, who co-hosts NPR's Code Switch podcast, he has a phrase: housing segregation in everything. And what's interesting is there's two ways to read that phrase, right? There is housing segregation in everything. And also, we are housing segregation in everything, right? So I think that too many Americans don't have a concept of how racism has operated in our country for so long, right? There's a ton of Americans who were like, man, I can't wait for racism to be over on January 20th. Right?
Oh, well, it's going to be a rough day for them.
Right. And I would say that, of the 75 million people who voted for Trump.
I never say his name.
Fair enough.
45.
Fair enough. I'm with that.
No adding energy to that.
All right. Okay. I would say 5 million of them think they're racist. 5 million of them go, you know what? Yeah, I'm racist. I don't give a fuck. And I would think 70 million of them would go, how dare you? Right? And the reason is that they don't understand what racism is. So I think that's the problem. I think that, now look, that's a complex solution, but the reason is very straightforward, that we don't understand. We have never been taught what racism is. Right? And I have another, as Brian Stevenson would say, if we had a real sort of truth and reconciliation in this country, that would change things.
Well, I just came back from Seoul, Korea, a country that has COVID under. They're a country where the community comes first. You introduce yourself by your own, plays a big part in there. And so within 4 days of 2 people dying of COVID who had come in from Wuhan, they had a national policy in place, and less than 500 people of 50 million have died. It's pretty empty. People are staying home, but everyone wears a mask all the time. The surveillance that is available everywhere in the world, they use it to track people and to let you know in every neighborhood on your phone and when you go in restaurants. And that's really wonderful. But they have a high suicide rate. And I also got to experience what it's like to not get to have individual freedoms there, and the pain and suffering that people have because the expectation is to serve the community. And coming back to America after that, I started having this thought that possibly the strength of America is in the polarity, that's what's keeping the scales balanced. That we've got these people over here, and we got these people over here, and somehow it's the only nation in the world with this kind of polarity that's still holding.
So 2 things. Doesn't feel balanced, does it?
Well, I believe in the reconciliation of opposites. So in that sense, I feel like, there's light, there's shadow. And from, the 45 voters side, the Biden voters are the shadow, and vice versa. I mean, and that's kind of what my movie is. It's like I'm showing you 2 groups of people who see each other in very different ways. What's the truth? Is there even such a thing as truth? I mean, phenomenology says that there is no reality other than the one you experience.
I mean, right. But I think it goes without saying that, well, not it goes without saying, I think it bears saying that our maternal mortality rate is going up, particularly among Black, brown / poor women, and things are getting worse for Black and brown people and poor people in general, right?
I'm going to take the devil's advocate with you, and we're going to talk about factfulness. And it's a really wonderful book written by the Swedish Minister of Health. And if you look at that, he talks about the fact that most journalists are educated from like 1965. The fact is that on the planet, everything has gotten better for everybody on the planet. And if you were to take a test about what is the state of the world for everybody, it's better for everybody. There's still some really, really shitty stuff. But on a whole, everything is evolving towards the better. And it is not mutually exclusive that there could be a lot of shitty stuff and that everything could still be better for everybody.
It's better for everybody, but it's getting better more quickly for a smaller and smaller few than for the great many, right? Income inequality, particularly in this country, is getting worse much more quickly, right? The climate disaster that is coming will affect.
That wealth.
Oh, I'm losing you.
Wealth is moving from the West. Oh no, are we losing us? Wealth is, we used to live in a two-hump world, the poor and the rich. And now we're moving into a more of a one-hump world where the wealth is not totally concentrated. It's being spread out. I mean, you know what he said, people for whom $1 a day more would change the quality of their life. And there are people for whom $46 a day, which are the wealthiest people in the world, would not change the quality of their life. So I think our ideas about wealth and are still very antiquated. You know, there are people in America who could, what, Mitch McConnell, he could pay the salaries of everybody in Kentucky and raise the standard of living of that whole state. He's got that kind of wealth. So for me, that's more of like, is it good? Is it bad? We created it. We somehow, in our consent, we created this. We have an opportunity to create something else. But I will tell you that I feel much more secure with someone, you know, who would say, I don't like niggers, than I do with someone who would be like, oh, I don't see color, or, oh, I you know, I come on over. You know, there's an authenticity to someone who is clear that I don't like you and I don't want you in my house, than to people who, you know, are being politically correct. And you can tell that there's incongruity. And that's what I feel about New York City and the arts community. They talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And, you know, it's like the emperor has no clothes on and nobody tells them. I mean, I tell them all the time, and you know, I pay the price for it because I can't live in the gaslighting craziness of like you trying to make me think you're, and it's like, no.
Yeah. I mean, look, I get that. I struggle with that. Right? There's times where I go, you hate me? Just tell me you hate me, right? And then there's other times where I go, I know that you hate me, but can you lie to me for one fucking day?
I don't want you to lie to me for no day. Just tell me you hate me and we can just stay away from each other.
Sure.
I can see that you hate me anyway, whether you say it or not, I can feel it.
But look, I mean, I think that it's funny. I think that applies to Hollywood in some really specific ways too, right? So there are white creators in Hollywood who are putting more Black and brown people in their projects because they feel outside pressure, right?
Yeah.
Not because they give a shit, right? There are many who give a shit. Don't get me wrong, right? But there is a group that could not care less, but is only doing it because the network is telling them to.
And that's what I call, they're moving away from discomfort. And soon as they're comfortable again, they'll stop doing what they were doing and they'll fall back. We, in my opinion, haven't come to a place where it's gotten so uncomfortable for everybody that we are visioning a new way. And that new way has not existed yet. So we can't solve this thing with old solutions, you know?
Yeah.
We're old thinking. We got to come up with a new thinking to create something that has never existed before.
No, I mean, I agree. But I think in the short term, right? If some white creator who doesn't give a shit about diversity is forced to cast some Black and brown people, in the short term, that's money in the pocket of some brown and Black people. And I can't hate on that, right? I
I
think it's I think it's important to understand the context in which that's happening, right? And to say we have to fight for better than that.
We
But
definitely have to fight for better than that because, rich white people take really good care of their pets, and they will happily make you one.
that's what I talk about when I talk about my function, right?
They will put you in a nice cage and a beautiful leash. And as Rashad Robinson says, do not confuse presence for power. There are a lot of very wealthy, very successful, highly awarded celebrities who have no power.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's why we have to take those roles that person deigned to give us, right, and keep fighting for more. I think the most dangerous thing is to say to a white person, you've done the work, you're good, right? Because
When
even
would
if
anyone ever say that? When would they ever say that? I
I
wouldn't
mean,
even say that to a Black person. I'm still doing the work. I'll be working for the rest of my life.
there's a lot of white people saying that to each other in Hollywood right now.
I believe you.
Right.
And I think that's one of the hardest things for me. I feel like the work is forever, and the work is what makes being alive exciting. Like, if you don't have anything to get up for to work, what's the point? But I mean, I
Totally
know
agree.
that there are people who just, I don't know, they want to sit on a beach all day. Like, slit my wrist.
I think maybe like 6 years ago, something like that, my wife got me a t-shirt that said, "This is what a feminist looks like," right? This was a popular shirt a few years ago. Um, and because here's the thing, after a few years with my wife, I definitely think of myself who is trying to do the work, right? But what's interesting is after a few years, my wife said, "I don't think I want you to wear that shirt anymore." And I said, "Say more." And she goes, "I don't like the idea that men can label themselves as a good one, because
Mm.
all men have misogyny in them, even if they've done all the work." There is, and so, and that is how we have, fuck it, Harvey Firestein donating millions of dollars to Hillary Clinton and then raping people, right? Because he was seen as someone like, oh, what an ally. He's doing the work, he's helping, he's making things better. And at the same time, he's a predator. And on a much smaller scale, that's happening with people like me who are labeling themselves as feminists, but also fucking inherently misogynistic. And then white people who are saying, look, I've got Black people working for me, I'm hiring Black people, I'm casting Black people, right? But then you ask them, well, how many people of color are making business decisions in your company, right?
Right.
And that's when it goes, oh, well, I guess I do have more work to do, right? And so I think I don't know, it's weird, I like doing it. I like finding new places where I can be of service, where I can be an ally to someone. I like when I go, oh wow, look, I don't like finding out that I was blind to something, but I do like having my blinders taken off, you know?
Yeah, that's been a big, I used to, in my younger days, not even that long ago, I would really get mad at myself when I realized I believed something and then I find out I was wrong. And now I'm like, yeah, that's just going to keep happening for the rest of your life if you're lucky. You'll keep finding out you were wrong. And try to sell myself, let's just die to every story you have, even if it's a story you like. Be willing to die to that story. Be willing to know that everything is a story.
Yeah.
And you made me think about Anand Giridharadas, who wrote Winner Takes All,
Love him.
about the way that, philanthropy has become a way for companies to, sell themselves as doing good while raping communities. I mean, you should see these new ads that ExxonMobil has about saving the environment. It's like you're ExxonMobil.
Yep. Yep. Chandra, I was talking about how, companies like Facebook and Uber and Airbnb are bringing in all these diversity consultants, right? And hiring more brown people, right? And it's like, well, great, but what is your company doing to brown communities? Right? It's like, it's sort of like, I think the metaphor I used was like, it's like the devil is hiring more brown demons to torture people with. It's like, great, I guess.
Well, but here it is. The shift has to be from giving people jobs and thinking you're doing something from them to building wealth. When are you going to build wealth in other communities? And one of the things that I personally experience a lot is that I have what are called foul weather friends. And when Obama was elected, I knew that that was kind of over. I was like, Obama's here, benevolence to brown people is going to be over. But most of the time, white people who want to help me, they actually think they're helping me. They don't ever perceive of me as their equal or as someone who might actually be able to help them. And usually the relationship goes sour when they realize that I didn't need their help or that I excel them. Like what it meant for them was, look what I'm doing. I'm helping this brown person.
Yeah. Boy, that's deep. What's interesting to me about that is that there's a light in there. There's a goodness in there, right? It's someone acknowledging their privilege to an extent and trying to make up for it to an extent, right? But still holding on to that table that's not even, right? So
and are invested in that status thing. They're invested in it because it's that thing they say that if there are people, if someone has $1, someone has $2, and someone has $3, and they tell the person with $2, we will give you $2 to give, or we give you $1 and you can give it to someone else. And they say that statistically people will give it to the person with $3 because they don't want to shift their status from being over the person with $1 and bring them up to being equal.
Yeah, I mean, I get, I think that I don't think it's terribly surprising that people are invested in maintaining privilege, right?
Gosh. My next week guest is a guy named Tyson Yunkaporta, and his book Sand Talk is extraordinary. And he's an Aboriginal First Nation person, and he says that in their culture they believe the greatest sin that the devil, that Lucifer, is the belief that you are above anything, including a rock. You are not that the belief that you are above anything is the sin. And I don't know why, but I've just always, that's like, I was fascinated by the story of stuff because I always feel like I don't have any material needs. And, I'm blessed. I have everything I need. So I spend money to keep it in circulation to make sure other people have what they need.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think that there's also a place for compassion towards those with privilege who want so desperately to hold on to it, because I think a lot of that is driven by fear, right? I mean, I think that if you as a white person think that if you as a person of privilege, put it that way, be a little more general, can lose your privilege, well, you've seen what's happened to the people with less privilege than you. And in some cases, it's terrifying, right? I mean, I don't think it's I don't blame Persian people, Iranian people, for wanting to be considered white as opposed to black, because being black in this country has got to be terrifying, especially relative to white people, right? Um, it's got to be difficult to say I'm neither of those things. I think the desire that to be proximal to whiteness is fucking powerful, and I don't blame people for it. But we got to find a way out of it if we're going to get anywhere. You know what I mean? And
I mean, my theory is we got to end the idea of whiteness, period. Like the way the Haitians did with the revolution. You couldn't be a citizen if you wanted to hold on to that concept.
You gotta listen to the podcast Seeing White.
That's gosh, you're just giving me so much research. Seeing White.
Seeing White. That's another Chenjerai Kumanika John.
Damn, I'm loving the education.
Seeing White. Yeah, just look up Seeing White. I think it goes by a different name, which I forget. But if you Google Seeing White podcast, you'll get there. Yeah, it talks about whiteness as a technology, right? It talks about
and whiteness as property. There's someone did a whole dissertation on whiteness as property and how different cultures came here. And when you got your whiteness card, because everybody didn't come here white. Italians were not white, Irish were not white. When suddenly you got a white card, you weren't giving that up. You got to live in different areas. You got access to things that you didn't have before. And a lot of that giving people the white card was about, the poor farmers joining up against the manufacturers and stuff. And the communists were supporting them. The communists were supporting the sharecroppers to rise up. And they were like, oh, we need to break that up. Hey, you people, come and join the white club.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a big reason that Middle Eastern people and Iranians in particular have been considered white for the last 100 years, is because there were property disputes in the early 20th century, and somehow or another they convinced one judge that no, we're from the Tigris and Euphrates. That's where white people came from, so we're white, basically. And they went, okay. And we've been white on the census ever since. When I applied to UC Berkeley, I had to check off white. And I was like, this is great. And what's hilarious is sometimes on Twitter, when I talk about white privilege, I'll have bros in my comments going, hey, I got news for you, buddy. You're white because you're Middle Eastern, and Middle Eastern is white. And I'm like, great. Can I get some of that white privilege? Can I be cast as a fucking lead in a romantic comedy in America? Is that going to happen? Can I go visit my grandmother in her home country with no problems whatsoever? Is that a white country?
Exactly. As war is being threatened right now.
Exactly. But yeah, we got called white 100 years ago, and I don't blame someone for being like, what being white is where it's at in this country, so I'm gonna hold on to that.
Yeah, I don't blame them either. I mean, think of all the black people who got to pass. That was one of the reasons that that there was such bigotry against the Appalachian people, was because there was so much intermarriage between Native Americans and blacks and whites that the people from Appalachia could look any way. And so there was this, they used to say they can trick you.
Wow. Yeah. But, you know,
Well, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. You're so smart and you've given me my work to do. My last question to you is, tell me something that happened to you that felt like the worst possible thing, but then it turned into the best possible thing.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm so happy with everything that's happened. Uh, uh, I think the only one that comes to mind is I ended up not getting a Broadway show that I wanted really badly, and instead
What show?
uh, Monsoon Dreams, Monsoon Wedding. No, it was some Indian, something Indian, which again I shouldn't have been considered for that, but you know, white producers are like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I didn't get that, and then because I didn't get that, I was available for "We Will Rock You," which was a musical based on the music of Queen, and we put that up in Las Vegas. And I lived in Las Vegas for about 9 months and made lifelong friends in that show. And I was never like really a party guy in college or in Los Angeles before I moved to Vegas. And then once I went to Vegas, I mean, it was insane. It's just insane. So it was great.
And
That
you
was
need to
that
go
was
there
like
often.
that was like my coming of age. Yeah, now I go to Vegas like 3 times a year for free, thanks to my points miles expert wife. And yeah, I mean, I don't know that job ended up having sort of lifelong meaning, but I am incredibly grateful for the lifelong friends that I made in it. A lot of people in that show, I still am close with to this day.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I actually worked in Vegas once myself in Anita Man, the blast from the past. We did 85 songs in 45 minutes.
Good Lord.
How fast that show was. So
Yeah,
I know how beautiful Vegas is. Vegas is beautiful when you can get out in those red rocks.
yeah,
It
it's
has
great.
been my pleasure speaking with you, Amir.
Fine.
Just keep doing the work. I have no doubt that you will keep pushing against, expectations and requiring people to step up and be better than themselves. And thank you for taking this time to spend an hour with me
Well, thank
and
you.
Marissa, and we'll
Thank
Red
you.
Pill
Thank you
for
both
America.
so much. This was great. I love talking to you, and I can't wait to see the movie. I'll probably watch it like this. But
Yeah,
yeah.
you will. In fact, I want you and Nina to watch it because I might Nina to be one of my
Oh,
spokeswomen.
okay. All right.
Does
Sounds
she
good.
like scary movies?
She doesn't at all.
Does she like scary movies? Oh, she doesn't know what that ain't gonna work out. It's scary. No, it's real scary. No, okay. Okay.
All right.
Well, you all enjoy yourselves and stay safe.
All right. You too. We'll see you on the other
Thank
side.
you.